from that point, I'd like to comment because, sorry to cut you there, because it would seem that that's why the government has actually stepped into all of this, because they have always maintained that they have not interfered before now, and things have actually gotten to a very worst state to the extent that they needed some kind of intervention. And it wasn't, don't forget, it wasn't even the government that actually kickstarted all of this. There was a visitation panel that went to the school, and it came from the agitation of these students. And the recommendation that was passed is the outcome that we're getting to see now. And to a large extent, they said things have started working in that state, in that institution. And you see that, well, they have started to refurbish some of the lecture theaters, joining the Faculty of Education. These are things
as a result of.
These are some of the things you can see. We'll get back to the issue of the fees. Now, we have to talk about those things that you can see. And they have actually started building the new Faculty of Management Sciences. And of course, they also gave contract out to do some kind of buildings, which is the Lagos Homes model. And you go on and looking at the projects that are ongoing, even the drainage issue in LASU. And you'll recall that sometimes you can actually pass the back gate from the Igondo area through LASU. Maybe you're trying to cut off, and you see how deplorable it was before these were actually put in place. If the government is saying that they have started putting these projects and facilities in place as a result of what they have started 3 years ago, shouldn't we be talking about coming to an agreement? Because now you started by saying that they should scrap the whole thing from the scratch. You're not talking about a reduction. So if they go, a reversal wouldn't then mean that we'll be seeing a reversal to some of what they have started?
Well, first of all, again, I will respond to that directly, but again, we must go back to the issue of how much they are budgeting for education in the state, first of all. Is it in line with even half of what the United Nations recommended? Because the UNESCO issue is still very much debatable, because a lot of people have touted that that's what is from UNESCO, but if you go through UNESCO, you will not see that. If you go through UNESCO,
yes, you will not see that percentage. That
you might not. In countries like Ghana, some are doing 30-something.
But again, we shouldn't misinform the people, because the misinformation has gone on for too long to the extent that
whether people do it or not is irrelevant.
Like the truth.
Yeah, whether people do it or not is irrelevant. Why won't you be the one that will want to do it and surprise everybody? You understand? This is it. But you see, even beyond that, I think it would be a very heavy indictment on the government to tell us that because people have started paying fees, the libraries that were not there in the first place are now being put in place. What it means is that the government deliberately neglected. And if you look at what is going on in the country, each time, you see instances where deliberately government institutions are run down because there's a long-term projection by certain people in the country to take over those institutions. Sometimes it happens in the private industry where government refuses to show the will to do the right thing. And so when it goes down, they tell you, sell it, it is not profitable, it cannot be profitable because it is run by, it's a public sector initiative and so on. As if you do not have the same problem in the private sector. When we are talking about the depression in the United States and so on, Ford and some of these major motor industries we're no longer viable, and they needed injection of funds from the federal government, and that was why people were, accusing Obama of perhaps having a communist sympathies, because in a capitalist country, for government to spend public fund to bail out private, industries, it seems would look like an anathema. It is totally at variance with the essence of capitalism. And so this is what we're talking about. We are talking about a government that is socially responsible.
Which is what we're practicing.
You are not even practicing.
And that has also happened in our country. If you want to bring that example, it happened in the banks here where we pumped in public sector funds to ensure that...
bail out
just
the
a
elites.
moment, just a
to
moment.
bail out the elites.
Just a moment, sir. To ensure that those who had deposits in this bank still had their monies. You might call them the elites, you might call them the poor, but if you had 5 naira there, that is your money. Maybe that's your life savings. Your 5 naira was still your 5 naira and it was safe. You could have it with you. I just want to ask you, first of all, what is your concept concerning school fees and education? Do you think that in government-run institutions, fees should be paid at all?
Fees should be, I mean, you have fees being paid. I don't think there's any government institution where students are not making one kind of payment or the other. That's not the issue. Before this, at LASU, people were talking about the hike. People were talking about, a hike from 25,000 naira and, by about perhaps 600, 800, percent increase.
I'm looking,
in the level of fees.
Mr. Chude,
People, even when we were in school,
Mr. Chude,
about 20 years ago, we were paying fees.
Mr. Chude,
there are some fees we are paying for.
My point
Yes.
is, do you think, I'm asking you a question in terms of what your concept is, in terms of, do you think that fees should be paid by students?
Education should be free in this country because of where we are, because of
What
our history,
levels
because
of-
of our
what
antecedents.
levels of education?
There's no basis, but most importantly, the
Mr.
government
Chude,
has the capacity. And that's not
Mr.
because
Chude, just a moment,
The
because-
LASU thing is a capacity issue.
Just
the
a moment,
government
sir.
has the capacity.
Let me get a question in. There is some level of education in this country that is free and compulsory. I mean, that is what our law says. What level of education do you think should be free? Is it all aspects of education? Should every
you see-
kind of
you see-
education
you
be
see-
free?
you
Is it?
see?
And just a
Okay.
moment, I'm just trying to pose a question.
Okay.
We're trying to conceptualize something
Yeah.
here. If you say that all aspects should be free, what part then do we put vocational training, technical institutions, even the polytechnics? How would you say that government should handle funding and fees at these levels?
Now, first of all, like I have said, there is no place where fees are not being paid. One kind of fees or the other are not being paid in Nigeria. No school, no public school, no government at the tertiary education level and so on. There's an acceptance that some level of fees should be paid. That's why it's being paid. After all, when we are talking about a reversal, for instance, at the Lagos State University, we are not talking from 350,000 or 280,000 to zero. We are saying take it back to where it was. That at the level where it was, the government had enough to do, even with the fees they were collecting. And the government also had a duty to inject fees for education in the state. That is what we're saying.
Which
so we're
students
not
admit
saying,
that the
so
government
at
was
some
doing.
other level, you want to study for PhD, you want to study for some other things and so on and so forth. Yes, of course. You want to look at what you have on ground and so on. But what we're saying is that the government should provide the basic infrastructure to make education accessible to the people. And that is the key, because national development ultimately, rests, on your ability to educate your people, to make sure that they have the requisite education that is needed, especially in a globally challenging world like we have today. So I'm not saying, look, we are not saying, we've never made that, that case. Of course, look at, even at the national ASU level, we had issues of, before now, students had been, making either paying departmental dues, faculty dues, and so on, and then, paying to even, obtain admission into those schools. We are not agitating.
The reason I ask
Yes,
that is because at any institution, in any institution, the moment a hike is mentioned, however paltry that hike might be, you see students on a rampage saying that this thing should be reversed. The question, I'm just asking, it's an observation, and I'm sure that you would most likely have observed it as well. It has happened through the years. No matter how little that money might be that is added to the fees, you just find students saying, no, we want it back at this particular rate.
In solidarity.
How do you think?
Yeah, in solidarity with what is going on with the students and the victims of this policy at LASU, some of us were at the stadium during the May Day celebration, and I think the secretary of JAF asked a question when he had the chance to speak to everybody in the stadium, and he said, look, in this state, if there is anybody here, and you had thousands of people on the field that day, if there is anybody here who is not stealing from government, from stealing public money in government, that can pay the school fees that has been imposed at the Lagos State University, they should put up their hands. There was not one single person that raised up his hands. It's about commitment. It's about commitment to a cause. It's about commitment.
How
to
do you know
society.
they were being